Anthony Martinborough Jr. will discuss Virgin Islands and national politics, and catch up with his next guest and former candidate to the U.S. House of Representatives, Ida Smith, about her journey entering VI politics and her triumphs and obstacles during the 2024 election cycle. Tune into this special episode on Saturday, January 18th, 2025 at 5 p.m. on Facebook or YouTube. See you then.
Good afternoon and welcome to our next episode of VI and We. I am your host and political commentator, Anthony Martinborough Jr. And I want to just thank all of you again for being with us, joining us here on Active Advocates. And I really just again want to appreciate everyone for their continued support. The page is growing, the team is growing, and we look forward to the continued work that we're going to be doing for the people of the Virgin Islands and bringing them authentic and real conversations that they deserve to have, they deserve to hear, and they deserve to be involved and engaged in the conversation. So thank you again for participating with us and tuning in with us. Before we get into today's show, though, I want to just put out a public announcement. So on January 27, 2025, Active Advocates and the New Generation Leadership Organization of the Virgin Islands will be doing a State of the Territory address coverage. So myself and some panelists, which we'll be announcing this week, will be on a panel and we will be providing direct coverage immediately after Governor Bryan's seventh State of the Territory address. So if you are interested, make sure you put it in your schedule because we'll be going live at 7 p.m. before he begins his address. We'll be live during his address and we'll be live after his address. So if you want to see some authentic coverage by some unbiased individuals, this is definitely an opportunity for you to be able to watch and participate in this discussion. With that being said, we are now at the opportunity to begin the show and actually make the impact that we need to be making in the Virgin Islands history. So I want people to just be aware of the opportunity that's presented before us. First things first, y'all know I have to cover Virgin Islands politics. Y'all know I have to share my concerns and share my thoughts and things going on in the territory and in the community. And today is pretty interesting because I have a special guest that will be joining us, former candidate to the House of Representatives, Ida Smith. And I'm excited to have this conversation with her later in the show. We're going to be bringing her on shortly. And I'm excited to really have this conversation because last week, if you tuned into last week's show, I had Dr. Cleopatra Peter and Karen Dickinson. All of them are a part of this group called People's Choice. And that was a very refreshing conversation. So if you didn't watch that episode, you need to, because a lot of information was shared about the movement and what they were trying to do and how they're trying to move the Virgin Islands forward. And many might disagree with how they did it or what they're doing, but they made a change, believe it or not. And so I look forward to talking to another person that is in that world as well and be able to really have that conversation and just enlighten the public from their perspective what's going on. So before I bring her on, it's like I said, there's some topics that I really want to talk about. And the first one is surrounding waste management and sports, parks, and recreation. So a couple days ago, St. Croix had some cruise ships coming in. And when the tourists entered the pier, they were welcome to trash, which is a problem. Um, when people come to visit the Virgin Islands and to spend their money here in the territory, they don't want to be welcomed to trash. That is not tourism centric. That is not tourism. What's the word I'm looking for? That is not tourism ready, and it kind of gives St. Croix the narrative that we don't care about tourists. which is not true. And I think it's a lack of disregard, there's a lack of regard, I should say, from the government that they would even allow trash to pile up at the pier where there's that's the first place where the people come off the ship to come into our territory to spend their funds to tour, and they have the nerve to have the place look the way they look. It was just so disappointing to see those pictures. It was so disappointing to see how the government just showed no real interest in the affairs of making sure our tourism looks the way it's supposed to look. And and that's a problem, and we need to address that, and it needs to be improved. So that was one. Another thing, the legislature got sworn in on Monday, January 13th. We have 15 new senators, 12 men, 3 women, and the now Senate president is Milton Potter. He's a 3-term elected senator. The vice president is Senator Kenneth Gittins. He's a 6th term elected senator. Then you have the secretary, which is now Senator Avery Lewis. He's a 1st term elected senator, but he was the administrator of St. Thomas and Water Island. And then you now have Kurt Violet, who is the majority leader. He is a 5th term elected senator. And then you have the other senators who lead the different committees. But I am going to just say this: we want results. The people of the Virgin Islands, we want results. And I really need the 36th legislature to stop playing buddy buddy with the Brian Roach administration and actually begin to put their foot to these necks of these officials and get them to get the work of the people done. We sent these individuals to the legislative branch to do 3 things: approve the budget, provide oversight, and the first one, which is pass laws. The legislature has that responsibility to make sure that the administration, which is the executive branch, doesn't abuse or take advantage of the people of the Virgin Islands. And I will say this: yes, people make their own decisions. And yes, the executive branch has to be held accountable for their actions. I'm not saying they shouldn't, because we just had the individuals who got arrested and indicted for corruption. Not saying that they shouldn't be held accountable, but I believe if the legislature had exercised a little bit more oversight, they would have been able to see these things coming up. But we can't have this buddy buddy system and expect to have real positive change in the territory. It doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work, and it doesn't really bring progress. And this is why I'm going to say this part: we really need to have a two-party system. We cannot have checks and balances with one party controlling every single branch of government. Where's the checks and balances? It can have checks and balances, don't get me wrong. It can happen, but it's not happening. And that's why the people of the Virgin Islands are upset, because there's no real checks and balances. People are just trying to be friends instead of doing the work of the people. And that's why we're frustrated. And that's why when we had the oath of office for the senators, it was empty, because the people are frustrated and tired. They're frustrated, they're annoyed, they're tired, and rightfully so. Rightfully so, because we have individuals who try to play super commissioners, they try to play, God, instead of being the one person that we elected them to be, a leader. That is the whole core. But when you try to be something that you're not and trying to misrepresent what you campaign for and what you know your position is, you're doing a disservice to the people. And that should not happen. And then I'm going to call us and the people of the Virgin Islands, I'm going to call on us. We have to vote these people out. If they're not doing what they're supposed to do, we live in something called a democracy. We have the opportunity to decide if they stay or not. So you can't keep voting the same people and then expect them to make differences. You have to give new people an opportunity to make a difference. If that individual doesn't do what they're supposed to do, you vote them out. Which leads me to my last topic. And many people know it because I was a former candidate of the Board of Elections in the 2024 election cycle. I am running again in 2026. And it's like every week, the election system and the Board of Elections is always in something, always in something. And the people of the Virgin Islands are just frustrated. That's why they ain't even registering to vote. They just released online registration, which I believe is commendable. It's about time. I've been pushing that on my platform, so I'm really pleased that we finally allow online registration. However, the problem I now have is what oversight is going to be provided to make sure that this online registration system is being used and that money is not being spent to maintain a system that's not being used? Because you could have an online registration system, but if you don't have an election system that is aggressively going out to get people registered to vote, you're kind of defeating the purpose of providing an option. And so that's why when I campaigned for the Board of Elections, I specifically stated when we have the online registration system, we have to make sure that we have a voter engagement recruitment process, which will allow individuals to understand that they now have an online registration option and that these are the ways that you can become a registered voter and what a registered voter actually means. And that's the problem. The people are missing the educational aspect of what the election system and what the board is supposed to be doing. And that's why people don't vote. That's why people are not they're not involved. And then quite frankly, they don't know. Somebody who doesn't know something can't make a change unless they know about it. So I can't learn about Congress if I don't know anything about Congress. I can't vote for someone in Congress and make the best decision I believe is possible if I don't know what Congress is. Then it just becomes a popularity contest. That's the problem. And I keep telling people an uneducated society is a silenced society. If you're uneducated and you don't understand what's happening in your society, you might as well just be silent. So we have to do better by educating our society and what it's supposed to be like, what government is supposed to function like, what democracy is supposed to function like. And then we can begin to really understand the difference between senators, between governors, between board members, between executive directors, because everybody can't do everything, but they try to do everything. And that's why the public is confused. So if we take a different approach and stop with this popularity contest and stop with this on education and actually educate like we say we want to do, then we will have a more educated society that can begin to make more responsible decisions, and then we can begin to see our students scores increase. We can begin to see the decrease in gun violence. We can begin to see the increase in businesses. We can begin to see the economy rising because we have educated individuals who knows how to make a change. You can't expect people to make a change if they don't know how to. And that's why our officials have used that opportunity of people not knowing to play a role in stifling the growth of the territory. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some leaders out there that are making great changes, and I'm not going to sit here and try to say they haven't. However, we don't have enough of them because we don't vote others to help them. It's like we have, and then there's another saying that I like to say. If you have 10 bad guys and you have 5 good guys, but you keep adding more bad guys, the 5 good guys are going to be silent at some point. Or the changes they make are not going to be big enough because the bad guys are the ones making the chaos. And that can't happen. That's why God had to have individuals to carry out his mission. If he didn't have people to help him out, the bad guys would just continue doing what they're doing, and the message of what he's trying to spread would not go anywhere. And so that's why people need to understand that education is the cornerstone of a society. Now, to conclude, in just a second, my next guest had an interesting journey in the election cycle. One that many might say was traditional. I differ. It was not traditional. We're going to find out in a moment after the commercial break why it wasn't traditional and what occurred and how it occurred and why we're in this position now that we're trying to figure out who's in charge, the board or the supervisor. Let me just clear the air. As a board, as a candidate for the Virgin Islands Board of Elections in 2026, the board is in charge. And then the board is in charge because of one reason. We hired the supervisor. Point blank. So if the supervisor doesn't do what we are telling them to do, then you're being insubordinate. And I've said this before, and I've said this publicly, and I don't change my mind on it. Don't get me wrong. Supervisor Fox and I have a great relationship. We do. But I have to call out wrong. And you went against your boss. Nobody is saying you can't disagree with your boss, but this is not the way you do that. You do what your boss is telling you to do. If you refuse to do it, there is a process that goes. You resign, and then you file a case in court, and you'll be known as a whistleblower. Because I mean, they've done something illegal that they shouldn't done. They shouldn't have done. That is the process. So anybody who feels that they disagree with what I'm saying, to be honest, that's your opinion. You can have it. But as an individual, that is how the process goes. Currently, I'm an educator, and I cannot take my employer to court. I have to resign and then take them to court or take them to arbitration or whatever the process is and tell them this is exactly why I left. This is the issues I have. This is the concern. Or I refuse to do what she tells me to do and she terminates me. That's the process. So when we try to misconstrue the process and try to fool off the public, this is where we end up confusing people because we try to make things more complicated than it needs to be. That's my viewpoint on that. I went to law school, but I have common sense, and I know that's not even realistic. So with that being said, we're going to take a short commercial break. After this commercial break, I'm going to introduce my next guest. I suggest you use the bathroom during the commercial break if you need to. Do whatever you need to do because this is going to be an interesting conversation. So we'll be right back after this short commercial break.
Next on VI and We, our host and political commentator Anthony Martinborough Jr. will discuss Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his next guest and former candidate to the U.S. House of Representatives, Ida Smith, about her journey entering VI politics and her triumphs and obstacles during the 2024 election cycle. Tune into this special episode on Saturday, January 18th, 2025 at 5 p.m. on Facebook or YouTube. See you then. Next on VI and We, our host and political commentator Anthony Martinborough Jr. will discuss Virgin Islands and national politics and catch up with his next guest, Senator Alma Frances Heileger, on what motivated her to work in the legislature, finding her voice in broadcasting, and now defending the people as a lawmaker. Tune in right here on Saturday, January 25th, 2025 on Facebook, YouTube, or WSTX 970 AM to catch this episode. See you then.
And we're back. Thank you for sticking with us here at Active Advocates and, of course, on this show, VI in We. So, with that being said, my next guest is a newcomer on the scene in terms of running for office in the territory. She ran for the one of the top positions in the territory, the delegate to Congress position. She joined the scene. She's going to explain her journey getting from where she began to where she is now and everything that transpired during that journey. So please, all of you that are watching, let's bring on my next guest, Ida Smith. How are you doing today, Miss Smith?
I am okay. I am cold. I'm in New York, and I am grateful for the opportunity to speak with you. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
for joining. Thank you for coming on and being a part of the show. So, before we get into the whole conversation I want to have with you, I want you to just briefly introduce yourself to the public who might not be familiar with who you are.
Okay, so I'm Ida Smith. I am a seventh generation Virgin Islander out of St. John. My mother is America Hodge Smith, grandmother Inez Othelia Hodge, Matthias Hodge, and her mother was Evelina Myers Matthias. Three Meyer sisters married three Matthias brothers. So that left us with a great inheritance of land on St. John, Virgin Islands. And we have interest in several properties over in St. John in the Coral Bay area. I, as you know, was born in New York City, and I decided to run for a delegate to Congress after much prayers and after much consultation with family members and with the group, The People's Choice. And we noticed that things were not going according to law in the Virgin Islands, and we didn't want to be known as the people that accepted human trafficking and endangering children, minors, and being a part of Epstein. I noticed one day going to outside, I noticed that the newspapers were filled with Epstein enablers, and it had a picture of our delegate, Stacey Plaskett's face there, as well as others that were in our government. And it was upsetting. It was shocking. It was appalling. It was like, no, we don't agree with that. And if you have a representative, then that person speaks for you. That person is acting on your behalf. So myself and the group, we decided we're going to challenge that and make it known that to the world that the Virgin Islands does not stand for human trafficking, and it especially does not stand for abusing children or trafficking children. So I decided to put my hand, in my hat in the race, and I received the 200 signatures, albeit in Carolyn Fox's complaint in the Superior Court, she said that I nominated myself, and that's not even possible to just nominate yourself and be able to be put on, as a candidate. There's a nomination petition that goes around. So that was one falsehood that was done in that frivolous complaint that was finally kicked out, but it wasn't kicked out until late in November after the election. But it was filed 3 days after early voting. Interesting timing, as is this interview, Anthony, because the complaint against Carolyn Fox was actually filed electronically in November. However, payment had to be made, and it wasn't allowed to be made. It wasn't allowed to be made electronically. So what we did was express mail the payment to the court. And at the same time, we also sent a hard copy, because when you file electronically with the court, they send you a notice that within 24 to 48 hours, you will get, hear back from them that they're in receipt of it. We didn't hear back from them, so we wound up sending it express mail. And with the U.S. Postal Money Order for the $405 to get the docket number, we also sent in our request for summonses. Yet we did not receive the summonses, and we were in communication, constant communication with the clerk and the court in Washington, D.C., because that's a federal court. And this is federal violations of law. And it was a federal position that I ran for. And
Mhm.
there were federal violations under the American Disability Act. There were federal violations under the Civil Rights Acts, and there were federal violations under the Voting Rights Acts, just to name a few things. So when people wonder, well, why didn't it go to the District Court of the Virgin Islands? If you know, the District Court of the Virgin Islands is not a federal court. It's not an Article 3 court, and it doesn't deal with things that happen on the federal level, per se.
Mhm.
So my journey was real interesting because never on God's green earth did I expect to be told that I don't qualify. I would never apply for a position that I didn't do the research to make sure that I qualified for. Again, if you're a seventh generation Virgin Islander, not that you need to be, but you should qualify to represent the Virgin Islands. But Ms. Fox saw it differently. And I have to say that ignorance is bliss, and we should play this game called Bliss right now, because it appears that people aren't understanding that the Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court in the United States. Would we agree, Anthony?
Yes, it is the highest court.
So if the Supreme Court of the United States has already ruled as to the qualifications for the position for delegate to Congress, U.S. House of Representatives, then why are we changing those qualifications? Why would the Virgin Islands change the qualifications or allow the supervisor of elections to change the qualifications? Is way beyond me. And the Attorney General, although he issued his opinion and it was good, I mean, it was in my favor, he didn't have to do that because the law spoke for itself. And I sent Ms. Fox the documentation, the cases from the Supreme Court that spoke to the qualifications, and residency is not one. Here's another thing that everybody needs to understand, because I see all of the comments going in the Facebook, and it's really sad that we don't understand elected. Elected has a D at the end. And if there's a D at the end, that means after something happens. So it says you have to be an inhabitant once elected. The election didn't happen. My family and I, again, been there since before the United States was a thought. Before. So we're there, so much so that some entities like the National Park Service try to say that most people that were there before they came along are trespassing. Then we have the people that come there from all across the country that want to get surveys done and say that the people that have been there before 1917 are trespassing. Now, I sent you some documentation in regards to the Congress in 1917 asking questions of each other, like, where does the Virgin Islands, now it's called the Virgin Islands, it was called the Danish West Indies. And they asked, did you see the questions that were being asked by the congressmen and the senators? Like, does the Constitution apply to the Virgin Islands? Did you see that?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
That
I
was
saw
a
that.
question even then. And then we have the situation where the treaty was mentioned in that conversation. And then people act like the treaty doesn't exist, but it does. And we have to know that. We don't have to have the formal education of going to college, but we do have to know at least sixth grade education that when one sovereign takes over another sovereign, as the Danish West Indies was owned Denmark, and the United States, they entered into a contract, and that contract came with articles. And within those articles, it tells you what Denmark was giving to the United States and what the people that were there were entitled to under God's law first and then man's law. So it's important that people understand that this treaty between Denmark and the United States, it's called Treaty Series number 629, and it was ratified under 39 Stat 1706. And it's in force. That's what makes it in force. So I'm not sure why we're trying to say that the Revised Organic Act is our Constitution or can be our Constitution when an act of Congress couldn't possibly be the Constitution for the people by the people. And I'm not sure why Article 6 of Treaty Series number 629 is being ignored, where it specifically states that Congress does have the right to do certain things as it pertains to the people in the Virgin Islands, but not as it pertains to our civil and political rights. That's where our Constitution and our free will, ironically, that's the name of the school that I met you at, that's where our free will comes into place. And we have to utilize our free will. So I'll pause right there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just mention a few things. So one, you shared about the treaty, which became a conversation because there was a forum that happened before the general election, and the three candidates who were running, yourself, Rana Picard, and our current delegate, Stacey Plaskett, participated in. And a lot of individuals were referring to, why is she saying treaty a lot? Why is she mentioning treaty? Like, what does treaty have to do with the Virgin Islands? What does it have to do with what we need her to do in Congress? Like, where does it lie? So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want you to explain to the public why you felt it was important to mention the treaty during the forum.
The treaty is important, family, because it is international law. It is the document that controls the people of the Virgin Islands' ability to have whatever it is that we have, be it our rum cover over, be it our oil, be it whatever resources that we have, it belongs to us. But instead, we're taking bits and pieces. We're giving it mostly to Congress. And I felt it very important to let it be known that if I were elected, I would hold Congress's feet to the fire as far as this treaty goes. It's been ignored too long. It is the supreme law of the land. It gives us so much power that we're not exercising, that we're uninformed about. That's why I felt it was important for me to bring it up. It also would let people know that the Secretary of Interior, do you know, in playing this game called Bliss, Ignorance is Bliss, do you know that the Secretary of Interior is responsible for the Virgin Islands on the federal level?
Yes.
Okay. And if
all the territories, just to make it clear.
And all the territories. And if she's responsible for us on the federal level, then she has a duty to do certain things with us. One is to communicate with us. And when does that ever happen? When has that happened? It hasn't. We go through the governor, we go through the legislature, we go through the judicial, but we need to go through the executive, the federal executive that deals with so many things pertaining to the Virgin Islands. One in particular is our land. And you know, the same Secretary of Interior is over the National Park Service and the Department of Interior. Should we be having issues of land grabs with the National Park Service if the person that's over them is over us? Or should we have some type of open communication to where that's not happening? That's what people need to think about, because without the land, and they do have a plan to reimagine the Virgin Islands in the next 10 years, we won't have anything if we continue to go as we're going. As you can see from the schools are in a disarray there. And you were speaking about education. If we had education in place and we were able to teach our youth, our offspring, about emotional intelligence, we wouldn't have the fighting that we see going on. We wouldn't have the violence that we see going on. We can make a change, just like the school that charges $4,000 a month for a student to attend. They started off in a house with 12 children. Are we saying that we can't do the same thing, start off with 12 children and grow to what they have now, 500 children? And that is considered one of the best schools in the Virgin Islands? I think we can. So I mentioned the treaty so that people can be aware that before it was before it was Virgin Islands, it was the Danish West Indies. And at that time is when a contract happened between Denmark and the United States that really put into place 12 articles that benefited the people of the Virgin Islands.
Thank you for sharing that. And so, before I ask about some of the more recent things that are going on, um, during that same forum, you know, you guys were in a forum, and I need people to understand because um, after some people were referring to, oh, Delegate Plaskett beat the other two candidates in the debate,
Mhm.
and the
And she did
debate.
that too. She said that on her Facebook page, and it wasn't
Okay.
even a debate. It was not a debate, family.
So, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I just want people to understand for just a moment. A debate is where the candidates agree that they're going to be going back and forth, rapidly answering questions that are asked by a moderator. And it's
Yes.
usually managed and to make sure, and they go through all the rules. A forum is more of just like a conversation. The
Yes.
moderator asks you a question, and then the different candidates answer the question, and it's more of a calm, peaceful kind of setting where a
Mhm.
debate is more rapid fire, a more energetic kind of atmosphere, and the answers are more rapid. And
Yes.
so, and then to add to that, the poster that was shared was WTJX, Delegate to Congress or whatever forum. The word forum was used, and
Yes.
so I want to hear your thoughts on that. What would you say to people who considered it a debate?
They're mistaken. We were told, we were sent an email. Well, at least let me speak for myself. I was
Mm.
sent an email that it's a forum. They invited everyone to come and to just not debate, not sell yourself, not talk about your platform. They'll ask some questions, you answer, and it was supposed to be just that. But um, it didn't turn out to be just that because the other two candidates, they came with arguments to where we had to take long pauses. And I'm sitting there, I'm a mother. I'm a mother of three. I became a mother very young and a grandmother very young. So for me to hear two adults arguing or going back and forth, I had to chew on my tongue to not tell them to stop. And then we were told to look at our cameras. So I'm trying to look at the camera and not look to my left where all of this madness is going on. It was just a forum, family. It was not a debate. Although Ronald Picard sent out a notice that he wanted to do a debate didn't happen. We did not have a debate.
Thank you for clarifying that for the public. And on this show, I always want to give the guests who come on my show the opportunity to explain it from their perspective, because usually when people make comments on and they comment on different things, I always want to give the guests the opportunity to explain from their perspective so that
I
we, the
appreciate that.
people, can understand what
Yeah.
was their mindset through all of this.
And
Which
we
now
were
leads
told,
me, yes.
I'm sorry, and we were told before we walked into the studio, before we were mic'd up, this is not a debate. This is simply meet the candidates. It is a forum. We have 12 to 13 questions for you, which we did not get to go through all of the questions because of the behavior.
Thank you for sharing that. So now this leads me to the main reason why I invited you here. The main reason why did this whole escapade of the Board of Elections and the election system even arise. The Board of Elections and the election system on a whole, before this situation occurred, was a very quiet group of individuals making decisions in terms of elections.
Mhm.
Not 2024. 2024, we had about 12 different candidates run for the Board of Elections, which is a lot in the past 10 years. And then we had three individuals run for delegate to Congress. So explain to us. You did a little bit earlier during the show, but what happened? What do you think happened? And what are you trying to show or trying to educate to the people? Because you mentioned the complaint that you filed, which
Mhm.
WTJX published the article yesterday talking about the case, and a lot of individuals in the comments were sharing about why is she filing a lawsuit, like she's not going to get any money, she's not going to get anything, so what is she trying to prove? So it's now become, what are you trying to prove? What are you trying to show the public? Like, what is your motive? So I want
Okay.
you to just explain to us what the journey is for the public who don't know.
Okay. I appreciate the question. The journey is follow the law. That is all that Carolyn F. Fox needed to do. She asked, accepted my nomination petition papers with the 200 signatures. We're going back to May. And then there was a press release that stated I am a candidate, an independent candidate for that position. It
Mhm.
appears that after she published that, and whoever it is got wind of that, decided no, Ida Smith cannot be a candidate for that position. Because days later, I received calls from the deputies, both deputies under Carolyn Fox sent me voice messages and emails that my nomination petition papers were lacking signatures. Now, keep in mind, Anthony, we already had the press release that, yes, I met the qualifications with the 200 signatures. So, why, after the fact, am I receiving phone calls and texts and emails that I'm missing the signatures? So, we rectified the signature portion. Then I received phone calls asking questions as if the deputy was being prompted by someone, like she was acting, like the director was telling her what to say, but she was definitely off script because she would ask questions that just didn't make sense. Like, are you saying that you don't work in the Virgin Islands? So I asked her, do I have to work in the Virgin Islands to run for this position? Because the position is actually in Washington, D.C. And she said,
Mhm.
no, you don't have to work here. I'm just asking. Why? That's none of your business. If I work, if I don't work, however I make a living, it's none of your business. I didn't say that to her. I was cordial, but I'm saying
Mhm.
that's not questions that she should have asked.
Mhm.
Okay. So after that, June. June comes and Miss Fox sends me a letter stating that pursuant to Title 18 of Virgin Islands Code 411, you don't fit the residency requirements. I said, Miss Fox, residency is not a requirement for the position. And she asked me to present documentations that I do reside or inhabit the Virgin Islands. So I asked her, what's your definition of inhabiting a place? Because a spider can inhabit your house and you not even know it. But I won't be facetious. What is your definition? And then I sent her the two cases that dealt with the position for U.S. House of Representatives that the Supreme Court said that a state nor Congress can add to the qualifications of the position. She left it alone after that. Come July, she goes on the radio, she being Carolyn F. Fox, and she states that Ida Smith is disqualified because she has 2 voters registration. Now, she didn't put that in writing, Anthony, but for her to go on the radio, and lots of people listen to the radio, and that's where they get their information from, media. I said to Miss Fox, that is not true. And that's not true because when you register to vote anywhere, you're asked to certify that you are willing to cancel wherever your other registration is.
Which is what I was leading to, not to interrupt you, but that's immediately what I was thinking. If you
Yes.
Because when I went to file to run for the Board of Elections, they ask you, you check to see if you're a registered voter in the territory. If you have to be a registered voter in the territory to run for any of the positions representing the territory. That's
No, you
number
don't.
one.
You don't have to
You
be a
don't?
you don't have to, not for this position. You do
Okay.
not. You
Okay.
do not. But I registered, and I'm giving up my right to vote in federal election as for president to come
Mhm.
and be down in the Virgin Islands. So
Okay.
for her to say that I'm registered both places when clearly I checked the box, the person that did the registration for me, she stated very clearly, and there were witnesses to this that submitted affidavits to that fact. Do you have a voter's registration anyplace else? I said, yes, in New York. And she said, okay, I'm going to cancel that. But before I cancel it, you have to check this box and you have to sign to state that you're agreeing to cancel it. So that was done. I even had to come back to New York, leave the Virgin Islands, come to New York and go to the voters registration in New York and show them the newspaper article where Carolyn Fox said what she said. And they laughed. They were like, really? She's removing you from a ballot that hasn't even been printed? What games are they playing in the Virgin Islands and why? I said, I don't know. But they said, it's okay. We can fix this. We'll give you a certified document that shows you're not registered to vote in New York. That was in July. I sent it to Miss Fox. She made it appear as if I registered to vote in the Virgin Islands in February, however, did not show her proof of that until July. It was in July that she mentioned it. A week later, I showed her the proof. So it was just, for me, I think that her strings are being pulled. If you ask me what's happening, why is she doing this, somebody with money does not want me to be in the position of delegate to let the people of the Virgin Islands be free to live internationally, to live according to Most High's will, and to enjoy the resources that we receive from the Most High. They want to have something called the Heritage Foundation continue to influence Congress that we're only entitled to a small amount of our rum cover over monies and other benefits that we are entitled to. That's what I believe is happening.
Thank you for sharing that. And as a political scientist, I was watching the election season, and I'm going to be open and honest. Many of us didn't think that you would have been elected simply because you were new to the scene.
Mhm.
And usually, with the delegate to Congress position here in the territory, once an individual's in that position, 9 out of 10 times they'll be reelected. So a
Okay.
lot of us already felt that we kind of felt this was your test run. And
Okay.
because
Yeah.
you're letting us know that you're interested, because usually the delegate to Congress position doesn't get challenged. Like I said, the person who serves in that position usually serves in that position for a long time. Like former delegate to Congress
19
Donna Hussein said,
years.
she
Yeah.
served a long time, and
Yes.
so that position doesn't really be challenged. And so when we saw Justice State 2020, 2020, Delegate Plaskett run against a lady named Miss Shakima George. She wasn't successful. 2022, she ran unopposed. And then 2024, she had two different candidates, you and Ronald Picard, run against her. So
Republican
the
and
position,
independent.
yes, so the position really doesn't be challenged. So we immediately, one of the political science, was like, she will be elected at some point, but I didn't think this time around because you were new to the scene. However, that does not equate to you not having a fair opportunity to run.
Mhm.
And that's what a lot of us as the political scientists are saying. Even though we believe the people would not have elected you that time, that doesn't equate to you not having the full 6 months or whatever time it is to actually run and put yourself out there.
Mhm.
And it can be it seems unfair because if the board, and this is where I was saying earlier before I brought you on, if the board tells you you have to add someone, you go to the board and say, I don't want to add that she does not meet blah 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 blah. The board then reaches out to the AG. They didn't just make a decision and say, hey, we're gonna add her on. They got a legal opinion, which I think is right to do if you're not aware or you don't understand the
If you're
law or
not
whatever.
sure, yeah.
You get an attorney, someone who's licensed to interpret and review law. That person reviews it. That the top attorney of the territory, who represents the people, by the way, the attorney general sends the report, and he says his opinion that you are eligible to run. Yet still, this is still a problem. She then takes the board to court, which is what I was referring to earlier.
October
Which
18th.
exactly, you took them to court during early voting, when people was already casting their votes, because early voting was October 14th to October 28th.
That's
Early voting for the
interference.
general election is 2 weeks.
Mhm.
Primary election is 1 week. So people were already voting in the process.
Yes,
So people were now like, is she really supposed to be on the ballot? Is she not supposed to be
exactly.
on it? Um, like I don't know,
That's
because
voter
of the controversy.
interference. That's voter interference. That is what
I
she
believe
did.
it's so.
That is the game that she played. And it's okay because I trust and believe that everything that she did was for my benefit. That's how the Most High works. For her to file the case first in the small claims court, what does small claims court have to do with anything? I don't know. Then it went to the Superior Court. The Superior Court of the Virgin Islands, the judges are appointed by who, Anthony?
The governor.
Okay. And the governor got voted in by the people, right? So
Yes.
how is it that you can go to the Superior Court of the Virgin Islands in this instance where the supervisor of elections is taking the board who was voted in by the people as well? I mean,
Yes.
the judge eventually said that, but that's a no-brainer. So it goes to show that she was playing a game and someone was pushing her to play that game. That she went to the wrong court. So
But I want to just say this: when it came out, I was like, what's really going on here? How can
mm,
you take? I I am an elected member of the board. My job is to make sure that elections are free and fair, and to supervise the supervisor of elections and make sure she's carrying out the authority, the duties and responsibilities that she has for the election system of the Virgin Islands. I
mhm.
am your boss. If I tell you to do something, you don't do it, and this is where I'm going to come to the board in just a second. You don't do it, you don't want to do it, you then take me to court and
Exactly.
suing me because I'm telling you to do something. First of all, the board, and this is why I said, and I stand by it. And like I said, me and her have a good, I believe we have a good cordial relationship, but wrong is wrong. You cannot do that. You have to be terminated. That is a complete insubordination of your employer. If
Yeah.
I tell you to do something and you don't do what I'm telling you to do, you've got to go. If you don't agree with the decision that I made, then you sue your former employer in court, which is
Under
known as a whistleblower.
Well, not even that, because under Title 18 Virgin Islands Code Section 4, it gives you the remedy to where if Carolyn Fox, as the supervisor of elections, was dissatisfied, she can go to the Superior Court then, but not under these circumstances can you take the board members to court because you were not happy with them doing their duty. Now, I also read in the Facebook postings that someone was unaware that the board had the ability to place a candidate on if Ms. Fox deemed them disqualified. It is written in the law where the board is over the person that they put as supervisor. So we have to stop playing this game called Bliss. We really do.
Yes, I wanted to just mention that because I ran for the Board of Elections, so I know the position. I'm not like those people who run for positions and don't know nothing about it. I run for the positions. I know the code. If the supervisor does an action that the board doesn't agree with, the board has the authority to call a hearing to investigate action. If the board feels that the action is not correct, the board has the authority to make a decision on that action. The Board of Elections supervises the election system of the Virgin Islands. Just like the Board of Education, they supervise specific authorities of the Virgin Islands Department of Education. That's why it's called the Board of Elections, not the department. They have a specific responsibility.
Good point.
And I need people to stop trying to misconstrue what the board is responsible to do. And I think part of the problem is people just go and check members for the board and understand who they're really voting for.
Right.
And the board members, which I blame them partly for this, not actually educate the people on what their job is about. So you have someone you hire to do what you're telling them to do, to run the day-to-day operations. It's like this. I'm the governor of the Virgin Islands.
Mm-hmm.
I choose someone to run my Department of Education. The person goes before the legislature. They get approved, because you have the whole advice and consent. The legislature decides, yes, this person can now be, the commissioner or whatever. If the commissioner does not do what I tell them to do, and I am the governor, I can fire them. That's
simple.
my role. It's that simple.
But simple is not simple, okay?
Exactly. If she takes an action, he or she does an action that I don't agree with, as the governor, I can tell them, don't do it, or repeal it, remove it, stop doing it, suspend it, because I am the governor. I am in charge of the. People need to understand there's authority for a reason.
Yes.
And the authority was
there are rules and laws for a reason that we must follow, uphold, and have enforced. Speaking of which, Anthony, I gave the board notice before filing the case. I said, notice, this case is going to go forward, giving them an opportunity to hear what was done wrong, to fix it, to remedy it. But instead, my name got put on an agenda, and I was not informed about the agenda. It came to me, by surprise. And I happened to reach out to Mr. Muhammad, also known as Richard Wilson, and asked, should I be a part of this since my name is on the agenda? And then he gave me the information to sign on through Microsoft Teams. And even at that time, I wasn't allowed to say anything because the chairperson, she was cutting people left, right, forward, and backward. I was like, wow, is this for real? This is how a board member talks to the public as if we didn't put them in that place. This is how you treat the public with a title of chairperson. People were not allowed to ask any questions. They spoke amongst themselves. They argued amongst themselves, and then the meeting was over. Nothing was resolved. So again, I filed the case. It is not for me to pursue the case. It is for the Assistant U.S. Attorney General in
Mhm.
Washington, D.C., to enforce the laws that were violated by the supervisor of elections. I'm not an attorney again. I'm not a lawyer, but I do know what my rights are. And that's what I want the people of the Virgin Islands to know, that under the treaty, you have superb rights. You have international rights. You don't have to keep begging the United States to do anything for you, because that treaty, it guarantees your rights. Speaking of which, it was shocking on January 3rd
Mhm.
for our delegate to Congress to stand up and say what she said. And she had an opportunity to do that 7 times before since she was in that position. But now she decides to do it, and was quickly told by Mr. Smith. You see how God has a sense of
Mhm.
humor? My last name is Smith, his last name is Smith, to have a seat because you're not qualified. And I was shocked, because I wanted to know, how could she not be qualified? I went and I looked for the answer. He told her under a House rule, I believe it was 36, that
Mhm.
this is why the 4 million people that are represented by Ms. Plaskett and others cannot vote for the Speaker of the House. Did you catch that, Anthony?
Yes, I did. And I was going to ask you a question about that as a former delegate to Congress. So you were reading my mind when I was thinking that. And I want people to understand that the delegate to Congress is a non-voting member of Congress. They're not even called representative. They're not even called congressman or congresswoman. They're
No.
called delegate. That
Yes.
term is basically in referring to an individual that is chosen by the people of the Virgin Islands to represent their interests. She
Okay.
serves as the territory's lobbyist.
Yes.
She does
So,
not have voting authority in Congress.
and that is well known, or at least it should be. So when she stood up, I give her, I applaud her for her
Mhm.
bravery, for her
Yes.
courage. You have to know that if you weren't allowed to vote for Speaker of the House for all the time that you were there, nothing has changed but the date on the calendar to where you can't vote this time. And he said under Rule 36. So I went and looked up Rule 36, and there are 1,393 pages to their House rules, Anthony.
Mhm.
This rule that he mentioned is on page 797. And these are things that, if you're interested, to the family, you can just look it up yourself.
Mhm.
And it's speaking about from way before the Virgin Islands became a thought in the United States minds, from the
Mhm.
1700s, and how those people that were elected to that position, they have the right to vote for speaker. But because the Virgin Islands was only allowed to have a delegate to Congress as of April 10th, 1972, they don't have that right. And because we come by way of treaty, we don't have that right. That's why I urged you to read that March 31st, 1917 Avis newspaper
Mhm.
article that speaks to the confusion, and how it even tells you that someone um, misrepresented the facts, and they were trying to make it seem like some news came out of Washington, D.C., to where the Virgin Islands had certain rights and privileges, but we don't. So we need to accept that and stop trying to force ourselves where we don't fit in, because we're better off not fitting in. And then you made mention about the representative representing the people's interest. It is not our interest to be into human trafficking. Human trafficking is synonymous with slavery. It is not in our interest to be involved with um, sexual abuse of children. And that is what we're being known as. That is a court case going on in New York right now. The complaint is 149 pages. And at last look at it, the judge is urging the defendants, who happen to be former senators of the Virgin Islands, former governors of the Virgin Islands, both Mapp and DeYoung are named in there, Celestina White, Stacey Plaskett. The judge is urging them to settle. And if they settle, they're also claiming that they have sovereign immunity. You know what sovereign immunity is, Anthony?
What is it?
It's when the king says, I can do whatever the hell I want.
Mhm.
No court can say that I'm wrong.
Yeah. I wanted you to say for the public. I didn't know what it is.
Okay. They're claiming sovereign immunity under an act of Congress, the Revised Organic Act. The Revised Organic Act does not give, I'm not a lawyer, but I have a lot of common sense. The Revised Organic Act does not give you sovereign immunity to traffic people. It does not give you sovereign immunity to harm children, which for me, Anthony, is like a cardinal sin. I love children so much that some of my cousins, my family members, call me Mother Goose. So for you to harm children, I take that very personal. For you to be accused of harming children, I take it personal. And I was speaking with someone today, and they said, Ida, the people of the Virgin Islands are forgiving of a lot of things, including sexual abuse of children. I'm not accepting that. That's our future. If our future is damaged mentally, physically, and psychologically, how the hell are we supposed to progress? In order to progress, you have to first heal and then move forward. And that's a hard thing to do if you ignore that children were abused. If women were abused.
Thank you for sharing that, because I'm an educator and I don't stand for child abuse, sexual abuse, any of it. People who know me, I am one of those individuals who are entrusted with educating the next generation. And I take that seriously. And so when individuals, take advantage of children, take advantage of individuals and their rights, in sexually trafficking, that is concerning. And I agree, because I was reading some articles that, and it's not just, one or two articles. It's a bunch of articles, and they state the person. They're referring to Delegate Plaskett in their articles, and then they're saying the representative from the Virgin Islands. So we are attached to this.
Your
this
representative
concern.
represents you.
We're attached to this, and the concerning part to me is that we have that issue going on right now, and I'm just talking in general, but we have the issue where we can't get away from this Epstein situation. We have this indictment of these former commissioners and directors of the administration that was just released. Then we have the waste management. They just burnt down some trucks of a company that was just signed to provide trash. Our schools are beginning to fall. Our schools have been falling apart, and starting to fall apart even more. We don't have a running hospital. Our hospital is not even in good capacity to have any students, or any patients, and bring in anybody. The roads are like a danger to society.
But this paradise, right? But that's paradise.
Where are we? So what I'm trying to say is that, where is the progress? And so I want to hear from you. What were some of your priorities when you ran for delegate to Congress?
My priorities was definitely education. No ifs, ands, or buts. There was $138 million given to the Virgin Islands from Congress for education. So our schools would be up and running and state of the art. That was one. Agriculture, of course, we are in a place where the sun kisses us every day, where if you spit on the ground, something's going to grow. And we have so many medicinal plants there in the Virgin Islands that we can benefit from. So
Mhm.
agriculture, definitely, and having met with the farmers there and hearing their plans, and we grow food. And as a matter of fact, the agricultural fair is going on right now in St.
Mhm.
Thomas,
Yep.
day and tomorrow. So that those two definitely. Of course, we need housing. We need low income housing. We need housing that's affordable to where people don't have to work 2 and 3 jobs in order to make ends meet, where they have to apply for SNAP, even if you do have the 2 jobs. Those were three of my top. Mental health was definitely one because I see we need it desperately. Things are off balance in the Virgin Islands because people are trying so hard to just to maintain their living expenses. We need help. And of course, infrastructure to have WAPA cutting off and on. That damages you. If you have flashing lights, that damages you. If your electricity is going off and you have food in the refrigerator and you put that food in your pie hole, you will suffer something internally because the food most likely is not fresh anymore, but you had to eat it because you paid for it. So those were my top list of things to get resolved in the Virgin Islands: education, infrastructure, agriculture, and definitely mental health. I was planning on making sure that 10 years from now, as Plaskett was in for 10 years, that people did not have the same issues that they had. And right now, they're reimagining the Virgin Islands. They have a whole plan out. May it not be God's will that the Virgin Islands is not going to be for the people of the Virgin Islands, but for people from anywhere in the planet can come and stay there and call that home.
Thank you for sharing that. So we can have about a good 15 minutes left before the show concludes. So before I continue asking my questions, I want to just ask you some questions quickly from the audience that I'm seeing here. With the first one being, do you have any legal experience?
Legal experience, I grew up working at several law firms. I am the cousin to deceased Judge Ishmael Myers. I have plenty of cousins that are attorneys. I am not an attorney, but again, I know what my rights are and I can read and comprehend the law easily.
Okay. And then I will continue on the next question that I have here is, if you're running for a position as delegate to Congress, why didn't you have a public profile that was accessible to individuals who are interested in learning about your platform?
I did have one. I had a committee to elect Ida Smith on Facebook. I did.
Okay. And then another question I see here was, what would you do different? First, would you run for delegate to Congress again? And if you do, what would you do different? That's a question that was asked.
Only God alone could tell me to put myself out into that ring again because
Hmm.
it was not easy to commute from St. Thomas to St. John and St. Croix. And I didn't even make it to Water Island. But to answer the question, if it were up to me, I would not run. I would not have run to begin with. But to say run again, I would not. Again, only God could make me do that. And it was God that made me put my hat into the ring to say, disassociate the people of the Virgin Islands with human trafficking and abuse of children.
Okay, thank you. Now we could go back to my last few questions. And another question I have. So before I continue, I met you in October. So what people don't know, and if you're on my Facebook page, you'll know if you follow me. um I had and I did something a lot of a lot of civics teachers at NC really do, but I felt it was important for me to do. So I teach government and economics, and my seniors for at least 6 weeks. Every week we interviewed different candidates who are running for senator, for boards, delegates, to just different positions across the territory, and that's how I met you. So one of the
Yes.
days we had, I had then candidate Maurice James, Senator Maurice James, Senator Samuel Carrion, candidate Lisa J. Charles, candidate Kathy Benjamin, yourself, and candidate Barbara Laurent.
Yes.
And you all came, and it was a great discussion. My students were able
Yes.
to ask you all questions. They were able to have that understanding and try to just understand, like I said, why these individuals are running to represent them. And that's what we have to understand. Even though they can't vote, we still represent them. And
Yeah.
so I felt it was needed and it was important for them to be able to be exposed to the individuals who are putting their hat in the ring to represent them. So I
Yeah.
wanted to just state that for the public. That's how I met you when you
Yes.
came to be interviewed by my students. Um, Now, we have a situation where people of the Virgin Islands are just wondering, why no? Like, why did you choose to run now? Like, why? Because a lot of people were like, okay, she is not associated with the different things that are going on. She's not involved in any of these things. Why did she choose to run now? Why?
I
Why?
absolutely, Anthony, I absolutely was involved, but I was involved in the background. For
Mm-hmm.
example, the People's Choice. I agreed with what they were saying. I agree with what they are saying as far as the government works for you. Stop making it seem like it's the other way around. And it came about where I was doing a radio show every Tuesday from 7 a.m. till 9 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And the people would hear me, and I'd also pay out of my pocket to have lawyers come on to inform the people of their rights, of their special position that they're in. I also sent you the special census from the 1917s, and
Mm-hmm.
it's telling you from the beginning, these people are special, not special in a negative way, but special in a positive way. So when you say why now, I've been in the background doing this for 20 years. Whenever the National Park Service comes at a family on St. John and try to say that they're trespassing, I provided the documentation to some of the families, especially my own, to where it's like, how are we trespassing when we were there first? Stop trying to do this Christopher Columbus madness to us. We are native to the land. I try to be a part of the solution and not the problem. So, because the masses do not know who I am, trust and believe the judicial system knows who I am, the executive branch knows who I am, and the legislative branch knows who I am because I submitted documentation to them from the National Archives and Records Administration when they wanted to do the land swap between Whistling Key and a portion of Estate Catherineburg, which is known as Hammers Farm. I presented at the legislature back in July, I believe it was. And that was another thing that Carolyn Fox used, my New York address, that this is what I used back in July. I am in Zoo York. I call it Zoo York, Anthony, because it is a zoo, because it's an opportunity for me and my children to get certifications. It's an opportunity for me to take care of my elderly mother who happens to like this place more than I definitely do. But if I had my choice, I would be on St. John in our family land, Estate 14 John's Folly, every single day until God calls me home. So to answer your question, why now? It's not just now. Stacy Plaskett even knew of me back when she first put her hat in the race. She sent me a text message. She sent me an email where she knows of my family having had troubles with lawyers in the Virgin Islands that took my family to court, stating that they wanted to quiet title to 27.3 acres of land that belonged to us. And the district court told them they didn't own it. They appealed to the Third Circuit Court. The Third Circuit agreed with the District Court of the Virgin Islands. But yet, to this day, they're still trying the same tactics because our family, our people in the Virgin Islands are ignorant to the facts and the laws that deals with your rights to land, your rights to private property. I have been in this fight for a long time. So it's not just now that I came into this. I've just preferred to stay in the background. But because of the human trafficking, the molestation of children, I could no longer stand to the back. And as Dr. Cleopatra Peters always says, if you stay quiet, then evil wins. And I could not stay quiet as it pertains to that.
Thank you. Before I ask you a next question I have, I just read this. I'm seeing this comment. It says, "What the Virgin Islands people should have to do to give face a chance to run." It's simple: choose them, encourage them, choose them, support them, be there for them, defend them, and be present. And I think
present.
that's the whole thing. Like, I ran for the Board of Elections in 2024. And I was the youngest person to run for the board in its entire history. I received a good bit of support, don't get me wrong. Mm-hmm. However, many people didn't know who I am, which is understandable. That's why I'm present with the community. I haven't went anywhere. I still been sharing videos, going live, educating the people from my perspective, because it's not about a title for me.
Not for me either.
It's not about a title for me. It's about representing the people. Now, the position gives me more latitude. It gives me more advantages to be able to carry out what I want to execute or what I want to change. But if I could have done it in my own, just being myself, and I could have done it with all the resources the position has, I wouldn't even need the title.
Right.
It just comes with that. Yes. And that's what people try to misconstrue. They want the title, but they don't want to do the actual bidding of the people. And so, like I said, the only way for us to have new people representing us is we need to give new people the opportunity to choose new people. We need to encourage, and that's another thing. When new people run for office, yes, you need to vet them. I absolutely agree with that. I don't vet them softly. You need to vet them hard, because they're going to have to go against some tough pressure to get what needs to be done for the people. However, I think us as a people, we a lot of times scrutinize the new candidates harder and unfair than the people who've been doing it for years and have not provided any results.
None.
And I, for one, can say that because I ran for the Board of Elections, and the first thing somebody told me was, do you know what you're doing? Do you know what you're running for? Because of my age. What does me being 21 have to do with what I am capable of serving on the Board of Elections? What does that? We have somebody who's 65 on the Board of Elections and have not done anything in the past 20 years. So what is really your argument? Yes. And that's why we have a lot of new people who don't run for office, because the Virgin Islands climate in terms of people running for office does not make it design, or they don't design it that's inclusive enough for new people to get an opportunity to run, and that, or to get the opportunity or even have the confidence to run. There's a lot of people who are positively ready to make changes in their territory, but the way that the system is designed and how the climate is does not afford new people the opportunity to run. They don't
Yes.
get support, they don't get funding, they don't get the media attention that they rightfully deserve because they're running to represent the people. And when
Yeah.
we have the individuals who are in the positions that have the media, that have the funding, that have the space, that have the years of serving in the position, they don't get scrutinized just as hard as the newcomers. And
Yes.
then we don't get chosen to represent the people of the Virgin Islands. And then we hear on the news, we see in the newspaper, oh, we don't ever choose new people. New people never be given a chance. New people, we need change. Change was running for you, but you didn't choose it. Now, I'll say this. Some of the candidates who run for elections, they just run because they want to be seen. They want to be heard. But there are some genuine independent candidates that were running for senator that were not even considered. Only one senator for St. Croix independent was considered. So when we really talk about giving new opportunity, giving new people a chance, then we really have to sit there and look at ourselves and say, do I really want change? Do I really want change? Do I really want change? And if you
Yes.
want change, you have to be willing to give new people an opportunity, even if you think they might not be the most experienced. Give them a chance, and if you elect them and they don't do what you want them to
And
do to
don't
get the
elect them
job
again
done,
again.
then don't choose them again. That is
Exactly.
it. Simple as that. But we
It
are
is.
accustomed to choosing mediocrity. We don't know what greatness looks like. And our children don't have the opportunity to see people who are really for the people of the Virgin Islands because we keep electing the same people who are going to continue giving us the same results.
That's
And then
called
we want to
insanity.
complain. Exactly. But then we want to go on Facebook and complain about Juve. We want to go on Facebook and complain about how much carnival nights we have. We want to go on Facebook and complain about somebody stealing somebody's boyfriend or somebody man or somebody woman, but we are not using our voices to actually voice the concerns that we have and actually get the change that's necessary. So
Yes.
we are part of the
A
blame as the
problem.
people of the Virgin Islands. We're part of the problem. If
Yeah.
we want change, if we need change, we actually deserve change because clearly I am not the only one that lives here and sees the problems we have going on. But if we don't say that we need change and vote change, change will never come. And if
Yes.
change does come, it's not the kind of change we want. Like right now, the media attention across the Virgin Islands is insane. We have this dark cloud across us. We're not hearing anyone saying anything. That's
Hmm.
why we have the problems we have going on. And those who are saying anything, it's always, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're not experienced. They're not knowledgeable. Their age doesn't make them qualified to be able to comment on anything. And I'm going to
Well,
end up before I ask my last two questions.
okay.
I am an individual who has a degree that's studying and completing my degree in political science. I'm almost there. But
Mhm.
that allows me to have a different perspective that much Virgin Islanders don't have because I
Yes.
am studying the system of how government works. And
Mhm.
that's why I try to be as truthful, as honest when I bring my voices and I bring my opinions because the people deserve it.
Mhm.
So, my second to last question is what has politics always been something you were interested in or is something that you developed as you got older?
Absolutely not. I'm not into politics because words have meanings and politics means many tricks. So I'm not into tricks and I'm not into games. I'm into serving the Most High and serving the people because the Most High gave me the ability to do so. That's it. I'm not into politics. And the position for representative of the Virgin Islands is not one of politics, as you so eloquently stated earlier. It's about going and representing the people in Washington, D.C. as to our needs. We speak to the people and we find out what is it that you need. You need a roof after the hurricane? Okay, let me go get those monies for that roof. It's that simple. I hate to simplify it to where people are like, she doesn't know what she's talking about. But trust and believe, that is what the representative does. It speaks to the needs of the people. And I'm sure our delegate, Stacey Plaskett, will agree with that, because she couldn't possibly disagree with. That is what it's for.
Yes. And my last question to you before I close out the show today, I first want to say this was an enlightening show for people to get your perspective, especially with the article of WTJX that they just published yesterday. And this is God and it's working. WTJX said they were trying to get comments, and I saw the article. I was like, huh, she's on my show tomorrow.
Really?
So
Because I thought that they did that and you knew that. And I'm like, okay, here we go with the games.
No.
Why now would they publish this right before I go on the show with you?
Yeah, so I see the article last night and I was like, wait a minute. She's on my show tomorrow. So and in the bottom of the article they said we couldn't reach for comment. We were unable to reach for comment at publication of the article. I was like, but she's on my show tomorrow.
I did get a voice message. I did receive a phone call from Tom Eater, and asked me if I'd like to give a comment. And I didn't get a chance to get back to him, but I wanted to also send it in an email form, because the media tends to twist your words as they so choose, like he's done in the past. I met with Tom Eater and he took at least 400 pictures of me sitting there speaking to him for 40 minutes straight. And when I asked for the pictures, it was like, oh, only these two. But then they use pictures of you that makes you look like you're having a stroke or you're going through something horrible. But Tom Eater did get an email from me after the writing of his article. And I stated to him that it's very important that he let the public know the truth. And the truth is that Carolyn Fox had the judges at the voting centers distribute a declaration having registered voters waive their right to vote. And I sent that to you too. Did you get it? Yeah, you should put that up so that the people can see. That's a violation of
which one is
law.
Which document is that?
I sent you two, and it was yesterday, I believe. And it's voters' right that the voters refusing to use the ballot. This one? Yeah. Come on. Okay. Yes. That document right there is a violation of your voters' right, of your civil rights, of your constitutional right. It's having you sign that you refuse to use the tabulator. You don't have to use the tabulator. That is written into the American Disabilities Act, federal law, that a person that could not necessarily read the tabulator and a person that's disabled in any way, they have to have a ballot box. So for her to have that at the voting centers, and do you notice that it doesn't say the government of the Virgin Islands on the top? It just says the election systems of the Virgin Islands, but usually all of the letterheads say government of the Virgin Islands. So who distributed that? That's one of the exhibits that went along with the complaint. That is being shown to the U.S. Attorney's Office, because that should not have been presented to the registered voters in the Virgin Islands. It's not presented anyplace else in the United States. So why are you asking people to sign away their right to vote if they don't want to use the tabulator? That's wrong.
Yeah, so I'm glad they published it yesterday, because I know I was gonna have you on. You was gonna be on the show, and I was like, "This is God." They published it yesterday. I have you on today, and I can now ask you, and we can actually have a conversation relative to like I said, the article that was published. And like I said, my last question for you, before I close, is what's next for you?
Life, living it. The beat goes on. Whatever is God's will is for me. And I so appreciate and accept that because that's all we can do, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's it.
So, with that being said, I want to thank you for being a part of the show. I want to thank you for choosing my show to be able to speak about your concerns and voice your perspective of how all of this came to be. I want to thank the people. I must add, this is one of the most engagement shows that I've had since this show started, and this is, I believe, episode 4. And this is the most comments that this show has had. This is the most engagement we've had so far in terms of a live show. So I want to thank all of the viewers that are participating. But like I said, I want to just thank you for coming on the show and sharing your opinions and concerns. For those of you who are watching, next week we have Senator Alma Frances Heiliger. She's going to be on our show next week. She's the independent senator from St. Thomas and John District. And I look forward to the conversation that I'm going to be having with her in regards to her service as a senator in the territory before she became a senator, what she was doing in broadcasting. And I want you all to tune into that. It's January 25th, 2025 at 5 p.m. So with that being said, I want to thank the people for joining us. We're going to end off with, of course, the video, and I will see you all next week, Saturday.
Thank you so much. Peace and love to you and the listening audience.
Yes.
Next on VI and We, our host and political commentator Anthony Martin Burrow Jr. will discuss Virgin Islands and national politics, and catch up with his next guest, Senator Alma Frances Heiliger, on what motivated her to work in the legislature, finding her voice in broadcasting, and now defending the people as a lawmaker. Tune in right here on Saturday, January 25th, 2025 on Facebook, YouTube, or WSTX 970 AM to catch this episode. See you then.